name's Julie Sherry and I work for Stand Up to Racism in our national office, and I'm going to be chairing today's session, which is No to the Hostile Environment, Uniting Against the Nationality and Borders Bill. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers today from right across the movement. I'll introduce them in turn for the sake of time. And, you know, hopefully really today's meeting is a bit of a panel that's going to draw together all those different elements of how we're fighting for the rights of refugees and migrants and to oppose the racist hostile environment that, you know, marks the agenda of this cabinet. I think what we're facing at the moment is a situation where, in the wake of a quite large growth of the anti-racist movement, in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, and also in light of very widespread support and solidarity with refugees, where we're actually seeing a cabinet that is trying to you know, further intensify their racist attacks, and they've launched a number of bills and ideological attacks and so on to intensify that racist agenda. And one of the key elements of that is the Nationality and Borders Bill, which I won't go into too much detail explaining because I'll be stealing the speeches of our brilliant panelists, but it marks you know, a very serious intensification of the hostile environment and really lays down a challenge, I think, to anti-racists in the movement everywhere about what we can do to challenge and oppose this cruel, you know, racist bill, which our panelists will hopefully go through the detail of what it will mean. You know, one of the things that I hope shapes the meeting is, you know, I'm joining you here from Pollokshields, which is where I grew up, round the corner from Kenmure Street, where we saw in May the absolutely fantastic, you know, mass solidarity action that stopped two neighbours being dawn raided. And they were, you know, the police were forced to release them despite an enormous presence in the area on Eid, which was very unwelcome by the community. So I'll leave the other speakers that we've got today to come in and explain, you know, that amazing example of how we can actually take on this racist agenda and win some victories. But I thought I would mention that, you know, we do have an example of how we can oppose this and how we can take action. There's a whole series of events coming up in the coming weeks against the hostile environment and particularly the Borders Bill, which I'll also leave some of our speakers to come in and tell us about, and I'll come back to the announcements at the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the panelist speakers each with 5 minutes each to speak. After that, we're going to open up the floor for discussion. So people can raise their virtual hands by finding themselves in the participants list, tapping their own name and selecting raise hand. And in the discussion, people will have 3 minutes each to speak, with an auto mute that will come in, just because we've got such, you know, such a lot of speakers in the meeting today that we want to make sure we get in as many people as possible. So have a think while people are speaking about what you might want to add to the meeting, put up your virtual hand, and hopefully we can hear from you in the discussion. So I'm going to move on to our first speaker. We're delighted to have Enver Solomon, who is the Chief Executive of the Refugee Council, who's going to kick off today's workshop. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Julie, and it's great to be here. Such an important time to be having this meeting, given the Nationality and Borders Bill that Julie referred to. And I'd just like to start by saying, if this bill were law now, my forefathers, my mother would not have come into this country, and I wouldn't be here today talking to you. So, you know, this is an assault not on my family history, but an assault on hundreds of thousands of people's family history who are living in the UK today, who are here. Actually, I would say millions who are here as a consequence of this country allowing refugees to settle here in different ways over many, many decades. And the first thing I want to say is that this piece of legislation, the Borders Bill, has already been looked at by legal experts, 4 legal experts, human rights, QCs, and their conclusion, which I'm going to read out to you very briefly because it's very simple, was that this bill represents the biggest legal assault on international refugee law ever seen in the UK. That was their judgment, and there's no questioning that this bill drives a coach and horses through the UN Convention on Refugees, which we should note is 70 years old this year. It was signed back in 1951, and the UK government at the time was one of the founding signatories of it and played a key role in its creation. So here we are 7 decades with a bill that's going to really destroy the principles that sit behind that important convention and bring forward policies and proposals that are highly discriminatory. I just want to highlight 4 elements very quickly, and then I'm going to mention a few thoughts on how we can defeat this bill. So the first one, which is critical to understand, is the way the bill differentiates between so-called deserving and undeserving refugees. Highly discriminatory. It essentially says that people who travel through so-called safe countries, their claims for asylum will be ruled inadmissible, whereas individuals who come through so-called safe legal routes, such as resettlement schemes, will be given indefinite leave to remain. So a clear attempt there to differentiate between the deserving and undeserving individual refugees in a highly discriminatory way. Secondly, it's looking at actually offshore, banishing them to other parts of the globe in reception centres. This has been done in Australia, where the evidence shows it's been devastating to individuals' mental health, resulting in even individuals taking their own lives, and a lot of self-harm. So the notion of offshoring and exiling people is highly disturbing. The third element is the notion of criminalisation. It will outlaw an attempt to so-called illegally enter the UK, and that could result in imprisonment for up to 4 years. So what it is doing is, in effect, it is punishing in a highly draconian way the desire for an individual to seek safety in the UK. And then finally, the act of so-called pushbacks will be allowed under the legislation. We've seen a lot of the headlines about that recently. We know it's happening on the edge of Europe, where the Greeks are doing it. We know it's happened in Australia, and we know the devastating consequences and how it's in breach of international maritime law, and how it's highly, highly punitive, damaging, and destructive. So in essence, this bill is a bill which is cruel, which is highly dangerous in what it does, and highly discriminatory. And I would say, just summing up, that the way to defeat this bill is to demonstrate, A, it won't work because it will result in a more broken system. It will result in a system which is highly discriminatory and breaches international conventions and damages Britain's reputation on the international stage. Thirdly, we need to demonstrate the stories of individuals that have come here and contributed to the UK, and we need to celebrate those stories. Thirdly, we need to defend the rights through direct action, as Julie was talking about, the incredible response that happened up in Glasgow. And fourthly, we do have to try and engage with people's fears, because there are individuals who were loyal supporters of the Labour movement who are now fearful of the notion of illegal immigrants. And we have to engage with that fear, have the argument, and win them over to recognising how damaging and inhumane this legislation is. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Enver. That was such a fantastic start to the meeting, and I think really framed the discussion and the challenges that we face. So thanks very much. What we'll do now is we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Clare Moseley from Care for Cali. Clare, if you'd like to join us now, thanks.
Thank you. And you're going to find that I am very much in line with what Enver has said, because this Nationality and Borders Bill has become known as the anti-refugee bill. And as Enver said, there's very good reasons for this. It's not just a few amendments to our asylum law, it's really trying to severely limit the number of refugees who are given sanctuary in the UK. And from my perspective, I feel that its introduction has had more in common with an advertising campaign than a democratic process, because it's based on smoke and mirrors. This advertising campaign has been an attempt to seriously mislead the public in various ways, similarly to how Enver said. Firstly, by suggesting that if people travel illegally, they're not in genuine need of asylum. But dictators don't issue visas. People lose their passports in wars and conflicts. So being forced to travel without permission is simply part of being a refugee. It has nothing to do with whether or not you deserve asylum. Secondly, the government is misleading us by suggesting that this new bill is trying to combat people smugglers. This is simply not true. Right now, people are openly crossing the channel in small boats. And I say open because they're happy to be met by Border Force or the Coast Guard. They want to see the authorities because they want to claim asylum. It's their legal right. As Enver said, they're going to make this crossing illegal, where you could get up to 4 years in prison. This won't stop people from coming. What it will mean is that they take longer journeys further up the coast or more dangerous trips in lorries. That will put prices up for people smugglers. They will earn more money. The ones who will suffer is the refugees because they'll be taking greater risks. And the third way that it's misleading is by suggesting that if a refugee crosses a safe country, they no longer deserve sanctuary. But this isn't true. Under international law, people have the right to seek asylum in whichever country they arrive. This talk of crossing safe countries is basically an excuse for the UK not to take refugees. So to me, a big question here is why? The UK already takes far fewer refugees than France, Germany, Spain or Italy. France takes 3 or 4 times as many refugees as the UK every single year. So why, when we take fewer refugees than most of our European neighbours, is the UK government so very determined that we take none? And as Enver said, the lengths they're going to are extreme. They're looking at pushbacks. This is a very dangerous idea. If we're going to meet flimsy boats in the middle of the channel and turn them around so they don't ever reach the UK shore. It's shocking. What if we cause a flimsy boat to capsize? What if the actions of a British official could actually lead to an unnecessary death? And there's a wider point here as well because of the precedent. One of the reasons pushbacks are illegal is because the law of the sea says in situations like this, protection of human life must be a primary concern. So if there are people in a flimsy boat that's taking on water, we must get them safely to land. If we abandon this principle, could we see the horrific scenes that have occurred in Libya and Greece, where migrant boats have been fired upon, set adrift or abandoned when they're in distress? For the last 5 years, I've worked with refugees, and when you get to know them and hear about the horrors they've suffered, then you fully understand why they're willing to take such terrible risks as crossing the channel in flimsy boats. I've heard stories of men and boys sold in Libya, not just 1 or 2, hundreds, it's common. They come from poorer nations and dictatorships, so there's no one to protect them. In Libya, they're forced to work on farms and construction sites with little food and in shockingly unsanitary conditions. Many die there. Many others are killed trying to escape. Most of them are tortured and made to phone their families while screaming in pain to beg them to pay a ransom. In the last 2 years, I've started to meet people from Yemen, wonderful people, many of whose families have been decimated like those in Syria. In Yemen, this can be through famine as well as by war. Can you even imagine watching a loved one slowly starve to death? I'm not saying this to shock or upset you, but to explain why it is absolutely clear to me that the people I'm working with every day are beyond doubt genuine refugees, that they've fled their countries due to risk of death and have a very real need of international protection. In summary, our government plans to once again viciously abuse highly vulnerable people who can't fight back. The Nationality and Borders Bill is fundamentally morally wrong, and it's based on untruths about refugees. And it's also based on the belief that people in the UK will turn their backs on those who are in trouble. I know in my heart that's wrong. In terms of fighting it, every time we take an action to positively support refugees, every collection of clothes, every English lesson or football game, every sponsored walk or Facebook post actively denies the narrative that people don't care about refugees. It sends a clear message that people in this country do want to help, and our government have got it wrong if they think we don't. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Claire. That was really powerful and moving to hear some of those quite difficult experiences, but also just stresses all the more why, why we need to build that solidarity and why we need to challenge this bill. I'll just let people know that in the chat there are a series of links around the different campaigns that speakers are referring to and upcoming actions that are being posted, so make sure you do engage with those links as well. So our next speaker I'm really delighted to introduce is Mohammad Asif, who is from the Afghan Human Rights Foundation, and of course we know that the question of Afghanistan has been a massive flashpoint in recent months, with the disgraceful position of the government to only take 5,000 refugees within the first year. So we're delighted to have Mohammad join us to speak about that. Mohammad was also a leading activist involved in the action that stopped the dawn raid in Pollokshields. So Mohammad, welcome to the meeting. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, comrades. Thank you, Julia, for having me here. And I would like to say thank you to every one of you in the room here and those who are watching. It's hard always, where to start when you look at, obviously, about Afghanistan. 21 years ago or 20 years ago, when 9/11 happened and the innocent people were killed there, the question there was none of the attackers were Afghans, but then the US and Britain and NATO decided to go into Afghanistan and invade Afghanistan. And 20 years later, the same regimes, Britain and America re-empower the Taliban and abandon Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan. 20 years ago, I remember I wrote a letter to Tony Blair after 9/11 when they decided to go to the war in Afghanistan. And I asked him the sort of regime that we want to have in the future after the fall of Taliban. And Tony Blair replied my letter that this time we will not walk away from you. We abandoned you in the 90s, but this time we will stick with you and we will not walk away from you. But that's exactly the opposite. Now that, as the previous speaker said, who put it very eloquently, that refugees from Afghanistan, this 20,000 refugees, it's a guilt of Britain and Afghanistan, that Britain is feeling guilty that, because we abandoned Afghanistan, we abandoned the people of Afghanistan, we ruined the lives of Afghans. So let's take 20,000 people, let's remind them that Afghanistan is not a population of 20,000 people. Afghanistan is, a population of nearly 38 million people. And the way that things happen in Afghanistan within a week or 11 days that the Taliban come back to power, these were not just, unplanned things. These were pre-planned things in the Doha agreement between the United States and the Taliban regime, that you don't attack us. The Doha regime clearly says and stated, don't attack us, don't attack the interest of Americans, but you are okay to attack the innocent people of Afghanistan. And that's how the United States and Britain and others give legitimacy to the Taliban in the year 2020, by signing a peace accord, especially the United States. But coming to the question of refugees, if you look at Afghanistan right now, the borders are shut. When we hear from Priti Patel and Boris that Afghans can go to the nearest country, every single country, the border is shut, as it's shut here in Britain, that Afghans are not allowed to move anywhere. People are hungry, people are having no food. And literally, if I tell you, you will cry if you have children. A woman who sold her children, a female daughter was sold for 20,000 Afghani, which is not even, 200 pounds. And her son was sold for 30,000. And the reason she sold the children because she could not afford, to feed them. And these are all because of the United States and Britain and NATO intervention in Afghanistan. The billions of money that America and Britain claim, America claimed to have spent 2.3 trillion in Afghanistan. These money went into, their advisors and their corrupt installed regime in Afghanistan. The warlords and the drug lords and the mass murderers who fled the same time as America and Britain fled from Afghanistan, 3 o'clock in the morning. Britain claimed to have spent 27 billion in Afghanistan. Where all this money went? These all went to their close friends, Afghan corrupt officials who were linked to Britain and America, Australia, French and Canada and other countries in Afghanistan. Coming back to the question of Afghan refugees, right now I just met about 80 refugees from Afghanistan in Edinburgh in one of the hotels. People are fed up with hotel accommodations. They're here for 2 months, 3 months. I know some asylum seekers, who are in Glasgow particularly, they're here for 18 months, in hotel accommodations, and the Home Office is nowhere to disperse them or to give them a settled accommodation. Now, when we listen to Priti Patel as one of the speakers, sorry, I came a little late, was saying that, legal routes, every legal route is shut, for Afghan asylum seekers. Every legal route is shut for any other asylum seekers who want to try from Afghanistan or Libya or Syria, Lebanon or any other country. I'm running, let's say, for example, I'm running from the Taliban regime. Where do I go for legal route? There is no British embassy. Even if there was a British embassy, they will not allow me to go closer to the British embassy. The way their embassies are located, you cannot even go closer in 1 kilometer proximity to their embassies. Every route is shut. The same asylum seekers, Afghans who arrive here right now, I have the letters, I can share it later on if you want. They are sent letters, those who arrive on the back of the lorries and our dinghies or the boats, they are sent letters by the Home Office. Afghan refugees that Britain is claiming to be the Messiah of Afghans, and they're sent letters that your asylum claim is inadmissible in this country because you pass France or Poland or Lithuania or Romania or some other places. These are the same Afghans who are fleeing from the Taliban regime or the previous corrupt Afghan regime or the warlords or the drug lords. But right now, the Home Office is sending them letters that your asylum claim in Britain is inadmissible under the current legislation, as one of the speakers was saying earlier. These are the same Afghan asylum seekers who are fleeing. We have more than 3,000 Afghan asylum seekers right now in the system. Those who are waiting for a decision, those who are refused by the Home Office, and those who are refused by the Immigration and Asylum Tribunal.
Sorry, Mohammed,
and these are all in the limbo, and the Home Office is not awarding them any sort of status. If they're claiming that they're the Messiah of Afghans or Afghan refugees here, then they should be awarding, these 3,000 Afghan who are here in the system right now, rather than, keeping them in limbo and continuing their miseries and making their life even more difficult. So there are many, many issues right now with asylum seekers and refugees, not with Afghans only. We saw the
I'm so sorry, Mohammed, you're going to have to sum up because we've got quite a big panel and we're just a bit over time, but thanks so much.
The question is that Britain has to take moral responsibility, because if we want less asylum seekers in Britain, Britain has to stop bombing countries, and they have to stop empowering dictators and rogue regimes around the world. So that's the answer. Don't bomb a country where you displace the entire population, so not many people will come to Britain. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mohammed. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it's such an enormous issue with so much to say, but we do have quite a tight panel today. So thanks again for joining us, and hopefully people can, I know there's lots of comments coming up in the discussion, feeding off what the speakers are saying. So I would encourage people to engage in the chat thread as well. Our next speaker we're delighted to have is Rosa Crawford, who is a TUC Policy Officer covering, I think, immigration issues and issues around the question of borders. I'd like to say as well that, we're delighted, Stand Up to Racism is delighted that the TUC is a backer of today's conference, and I just let people know that, we've got over 1,600 people who have registered now, but we're still getting bookings in. So if you've got friends, family and colleagues, keep encouraging them to join, and yeah, we're very proud that the TUC has backed the conference with us. So I'll hand over to Rosa, thanks.
Thanks, Julie, and thank you very much for having me here. It's really important for the TUC to be supporting this event. It's really important for us to be putting forward a rights-based approach around asylum and migration, particularly at this time. And I think this event is happening at such an important moment for the Nationality and Borders Bill, because it restarts the committee stage next week. So the TUC is about to send out briefing to MPs, and it'd be really good if we can think about ways to work with organisations here further to develop our lobbying so that we can build a really strong opposition to the bill. Just to go over some of the campaigning that the union movement has been doing against this bill and the arguments we are making. We're making clear that the union movement in the UK is staunchly opposed to this bill, both on important rights grounds that others have touched on already, but also to emphasise that this bill is bad for all workers. And there are some workers in particular sectors that it's going to negatively affect, but it's also going to allow for more exploitation of all workers and undercutting. And that's a really important argument for that, because we want to push back against this narrative that there are some deserving migrants and asylum seekers and some bad asylum seekers or migrants who are driving down conditions for all, because that's the kind of divisive rhetoric that we know the government has used. We know it's powerful with some people, and that's why they use it. and they use it deliberately so that people don't blame the true cause of exploitation and denial of rights, bad employers and the government policies, but they blame the asylum seekers and migrant workers. So for the TUC, it's really important that we put forward this narrative that this bill is bad for all workers, and that only by building solidarity and demanding rights for all will any workers' conditions improve and people will actually have respect for their rights. So I think in terms of the political debate, that's a very important point to raise, and I know Emma was touching on this as well around the kind of idea of the deserving and undeserving migrants, because I think that we have to be very mindful that this bill has been put forward as a way to stop the bad people smugglers and protect the victims. But we're saying actually it's going to create more exploitation and discrimination for all workers. So just to very quickly go into 4 areas that we're highlighting in our lobbying. First, the area that's been touched on by the previous speakers, the fact that the bill breaches a number of key international conventions. The first, as has been mentioned, the UN Refugee Convention, by denying people's ability to claim asylum in the country of their choosing. Second, it also breaches a number of international maritime conventions, those provisions that were mentioned earlier, that any person who facilitates the arrival of asylum seekers is committing a criminal offence, including those who do so at sea. For our members in the maritime sector who are involved in those rescue operations, that is criminalising them and putting them at risk of facing a life sentence in prison. It goes against the UN Convention on the Laws of the Sea, as well as a number of other important international maritime conventions. So we're saying for those maritime workers, it has really serious implications. The second area, as I say, is that it will increase exploitation of particularly asylum seekers, but the knock-on effect will be putting all workers at more risk of exploitation. People may know that asylum seekers in this country are denied the right to work currently, and those who don't have regular legal status in the UK cannot effectively claim employment rights. So by increasing the chances that asylum seekers are not going to be able to claim a legal status in the UK because they've come through a third country or who have come through an irregular route, will mean more asylum seekers are in this irregular category, not able to claim rights at work, puts them totally at risk of employers who take these asylum seekers on, knowing they can absolutely exploit them, because if they report their abuse to the authorities, they will be admitting they are in the country illegally, be imprisoned, and then likely be deported. So that means there's a whole group of workers that are just going to be liable and possible to use for by bad employers, and that will mean more undercutting and conditions deteriorating for all workers. The third area we're very concerned about is that it will mean that those asylum seekers who don't have legal status won't be able to claim NHS care or other social security support, such as universal credit. This will mean more destitution for those workers, for those asylum seekers. It will mean people are denied their fundamental right to healthcare. It will also create more potential public health risks, because those with communicable diseases such as COVID are going to be disincentivized from seeking care. And the final area that I know Zita Holbourne from PCS, as well as BARAC, who's on this call, might want to highlight further, is our concerns about border policing being put into a very morally difficult position by this bill, by being asked to turn away vessels and being given this additional strain without any additional resources. It's another workplace impact that the bill will create a deteriorating conditions for those workers as well. So just to summarize, the TUC is saying instead of an approach that creates more strains for more workers, leads to deterioration conditions for all workers by allowing for more undercutting, we're saying we need an approach that's around fundamental rights for all workers. We're saying asylum seekers must have the right to work. All workers must be able to claim employment rights regardless of status, and all those fleeing persecution and threats to their life must be able to claim asylum in the UK. So it'd be really great to think how we can build that narrative. I know this is an approach you're all taking, but I think concretely as it enters the committee stage next week, it'd be really good to think about avenues we can make that argument and build the strong opposition to that bill that we've already built up already. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Rosa. That was fantastic and a lot packed into the time as well. And it's really useful, I think, the point that some people have been raising in the chat as well about the need for, the anti-racist movement to get out there and kind of challenge some of the myths that are out there around the question of immigration. You know, we certainly find that we come up against those discussions, you know, when we're out campaigning, this idea, you know, that people have a completely skewed sense of what the actual numbers are, and you know, that idea that, you know, migration is a problem that for Indigenous workers is just something that we really need to challenge, because of course we know that, you know, Britain's been built on migrant labour, that, you know, we want to build that positive argument. So our next speaker really follows on from Rosa's contribution. We're really happy to have Zita Holbourne joining us, who's the PCS National Vice President, also an activist for Black activists rising against the cuts, and also someone who's been involved actually in some of those campaigns around you know, fighting those deportation flights that we've, you know, those horrifying deportation flights that we've seen emerge as a prominent tactic in what this government is trying to do. So I'll hand over to Zita, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction, and greetings, everybody. Yeah, I've been campaigning for decades for migrant and refugee rights, and coordinating distribution of aid to refugees in France for nearly 10 years. And all the people that I've met in that time have fled persecution, climate change, conflict, poverty, and sometimes a combination of all of those things, because they have no choice. Nobody puts themselves through the danger of crossing deserts and seas unless what they're fleeing is far worse than what they're facing. And we shouldn't forget that the majority of those that are coming in on small boats across the Channel are children. The plans and actions by the British government to turn away small boats, as others have said, is a breach of maritime law under the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, and it contravenes international law under the Geneva Convention on the Right to Seek Asylum. Safeguarding lives should take priority over any national migration policies or laws. And my organisation, BARAC UK, has started a petition on actionstorm.org, Stop the Government Turning Away Small Boats and Migrants. I've put a link in the chat. It would be really great if you could sign that and share that. Other sides to the government immigration policy include the failure to pay compensation to the vast majority of people in the Windrush scandal who are impacted by the Windrush scandal. Many of those people have died before they've received any compensation. And over the summer, what we've seen is effectively the descendants, the children and grandchildren of the Windrush generation being deported en masse on charter flights on a near weekly basis. There were 2 charter flights to Zimbabwe, one to Jamaica, one to Nigeria and Ghana, one to Vietnam, and there was one planned for Pakistan, but the Pakistan government, good on them, refused to allow that flight to land. Of the deportation flights that have gone during this year so far, 21 were conducted by TUI. So BARAC, with other migrant rights groups, have been organising protests and national days of action against TUI, because it's important for us to put pressure on those who are complicit in the system, not just the government, because without those organisations being complicit, they wouldn't be able to do some of the things they're doing. Amongst those deported to Zimbabwe, I want to highlight one story, and there are many I could be telling, was Bruce Mpomfo. And Bruce was on the 2nd flight to Zimbabwe in August, and he's aged 29 now. He came to the UK, age 9, from Zimbabwe with his mum, who's an NHS worker. And for something he did 10 years ago, a burglary, even though he's turned his life around, he's been working with young people, he's active in the community and in his rugby club, he was deported. And we're raising funds for Bruce's legal fees on crowdfunder.co.uk. Help us reverse Bruce's deportation to Zimbabwe. Again, I've put a link in the chat. The government are training Border Force staff to work on jet skis and boats right now. PCS has raised strong objections to this, citing international law, the right to life, the right to safety, and the risk to those who are on those small boats, as well as our members who are being asked to carry out this work. There's also a statement on the PCS website regarding the use of private contractors to do this work, because that's what we see time and time again, privatisation and outsourcing of public sector work so that they can get away with the things they want to do. And the government say that the bill will make the system fairer, it will deter illegal entry and remove those with no right to be here. But the reality is, all it will do is deepen the already harsh, unfair, unjust, inhumane and discriminatory system that's already in place. They want to give harsher prison sentences when they already criminalise people because of their immigration status. That's what happened with the Windrush scandal. That's what's happening to the descendants of the Windrush generation. And they want to create an apartheid state in the detention system, which is already conditions akin to prison. The 30 recommendations, and this is really important, I think, to note, is that the 30 recommendations of the Windrush Lessons Learned report still have not yet been implemented. And there shouldn't be actually any new policies, any new laws on immigration until they have learned the lessons. That report was called Lessons Learned. They have no intention of learning those lessons, but there were recommendations. And if they don't learn from their mistakes, we know they're going to continue to do the same things time and time again. And that's actually their intention. And we shouldn't forget that the majority of people who are fleeing are from countries which have a history of colonialism and of illegal occupation, and those hardest hit by climate change, whilst they are contributing to climate change the least. And this is disproportionately impacting on Black and brown people. So it's discriminatory. And it's hypocritical, and I'm summing up. I can see my time is up. This is my last point I want to make. It's hypocritical because when they want migrant labour, they bring it in. So whether it's for the long-haul drivers, they change the immigration policy. And I also want to highlight, and I haven't got time to talk about it, but I refer you to the Voice newspaper, who's got an expose on this with videos and interviews. They have brought in from Barbados, one of the very countries that have been deporting people to impacted by the Windrush scandal, workers this year, put them in inhumane conditions, in unsanitized conditions, in caravans, akin to slave labor. Those impacted who've been doing the work say it's reminiscent of being on plantations and their ancestors on plantations. So I'd ask you to look at that report. We need to challenge, we need to expose, and the reality is this country would completely collapse economically, socially, in every way if it were not for migrant labour and the contribution of migrant people in this country. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Zita. That was really brilliant. And I know for the participants, we do have quite a lot of speakers in this session, but we did want to try and bring in people who have experiences of campaigning across the board around this bill. And I think every single contribution from the panelists we've had has been really, really valuable. And Zita also did mention the question of the link with obviously the climate chaos that we face at the moment. And I would just highlight that we do have another session at the conference specifically on climate migration and refugees. Unfortunately, it's happening right now, so you can't take part in it live, but to answer a question in the chat as well, we will have the panel speeches from every workshop will be uploaded onto our social media on the Stand Up to Racism National Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. So after the conference, you can, after the weekend, you can go and watch back sessions that the panel contributions from sessions that you missed. So I'm going to move on to our final few speakers so that we can get onto the discussion. Our next speaker is Kenan. We're absolutely delighted to have Kenan, who I think spoke this time last year, possibly from inside the Penally camp. You can correct me if I've got that wrong, but obviously there's been an enormous campaign there, and we're really delighted to hear from Kenan.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I am a Syrian refugee, and I came to this country last year, and I was an asylum seeker. I came in the only possible way, which is now they call it illegal. It was the only possible way for me to claim asylum in this country. Anyway, after a while, the Home Office found me eligible to be a refugee, and I am now a refugee. The new bill now want to segregate the people. They want to call all the new arrival or the people who will seek asylum after certain date illegal refugee or illegal asylum seekers. They want to deal with them in less or in worse way than the way they were dealing with us before. They will not have the same right I had it before. They will not have access to the legal aid, and they will not have access, or they will not have a chance even to claim or have their substantive interview with the Home Office, to just tell the Home Office why they are seeking asylum in reasonable times. The situation is right now, the people before the new bill, the anti-refugee bill, now the people now stuck on system for more than 2 years. I met so many people during my asylum process who were like arrived in 2018 or 19, and yet still they are stuck on the system. Some of them till now they didn't have a chance to have substantive interview. That means they didn't have chance yet to tell the Home Office why they are seeking asylum. You can imagine that. And some of them, they had already the substantive interview, and they are waiting. During this wait, and this, I think I noticed that most of the people in this country, they are not segregating between the asylum seeker and the refugee. During their waiting period, they are not allowed to work. So they are liability on the society. They are a liability on the taxpayer, and the Home Office want to keep them in this way. They want to represent the asylum as an issue. Because these people are waiting in hotel or a hostel or dispersed accommodation, and the Home Office have to spend some money on it. It's like £37 per week, but yet they are not allowing them to work. Many of them are lorry driver. Imagine during the last crisis that like people like saying, yeah, we came and we seek asylum. We have a good reason to seek asylum. We have a good claim, but nobody give us the refugee status yet, and we are not allowed to work. And they are ready and happy to give 5,000 lorry driver visa, for example. It is obviously that this country, they don't want, or this current government, they don't want a refugee or asylum seeker. The way that the anti-refugee bill said now, they will be happy to receive the refugee, not the asylum seeker, or the asylum seeker through resettlement scheme, and they will get immediately status. I want to tell you something, and this from my first-hand experience, and I didn't say it maybe before. In 2016, I tried to leave from my city Damascus to Lebanon. I was trying to avoid the military service in my home country, and I tried to get some visa. You know, I couldn't get visa to Turkey or to Egypt. I tried to just avoid going back to my country and avoid the military service. I tried to stay in one of the camp close to the Syrian border. And I heard for the first time about the resettlement scheme. And unfortunately, like I tried to stay there for like 3 or 4 months, and I failed to join that scheme. I was not applicable. And when I start also joining, I came to know that the people from the same camps are waiting from like 2013 and 2014, and it was like end of 2016, and yet nothing happened. And the situation inside that camp was awful. After that, I back to my country, Syria, and unfortunately, I have been stopped illegally and have been detention in one of the regime secret service branch. And after that, I decide to flee from my country for you know for a safer place, seeking sanctuary. In that times I couldn't again join any of the camps around Syria. I couldn't do that. They didn't allow me, because I was like and you know below 45. I'm not combined with children. So the bottom of line, or my point is, the resettlement scheme is applicable for certain people, and unfortunately they have only select a few families, and it's not enough to deal with the refugee crisis. And being part from that scheme, like it's almost like winning the lottery. So the only available way now for the asylum seeker to come to go to seek sanctuary, is the only way that to go travel illegally through Europe and seek asylum. And the anti-refugee bill now take that right. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Kenan. And I'm sure, you know, many of us listening are both, very upset and furious to listen to, what it is that you and others have been through. And I just think it makes me really furious to think that not only is this the experience people are being subjected to, but, the fact that this government is using this as a means to divide people here as well. It's just absolutely infuriating. And, we stand in full solidarity, and it's brilliant to have you come and speak out. And hopefully, your experiences will help us all redouble our efforts to build that mass movement of solidarity to break this racist bill and stand in solidarity with refugees and migrants. I'm going to move on now. We've just got a couple more speakers left, and then we will have time for discussion. Our next speaker is Ulrike Schmidt, who is joining us today from Amnesty International. Amnesty International have been, a big part of the campaign over refugee and migrant rights, and we know that you've got a demonstration coming up that hopefully you're going to tell us about, so that we can all know, what we have to go and do now. The links will be in the chat as well for these events. Thanks, Orika.
Right. Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm part of the Europe team at Amnesty International, and I quickly want to say a couple of words about the Nationality and Borders Bill. I mean, just echoing what Enver Solomon said earlier. I mean, if enforced, it would largely shut down the UK's asylum system. It would criminalize people for trying to reach a place of safety, and it would create the prospect of people in the UK to be prosecuted for saving lives. This bill has got to be fought nail and tooth, and there are several ways of doing it. Now, but I want to also mention a wider context, because it's not standing on its own. There is an increasing Europe-wide policy of keeping refugees out at all costs. This has been sort of getting gradually worse since the initial sort of welcome in 2015. Now these policies are costing many lives. The search and rescue in the Mediterranean has been largely outsourced to the Libyan Coast Guard, which is trained and funded by Italy. And the Libyan Coast Guard is intercepting the little boats with desperate people and returning them to the notorious DCIM camps in Libya, where rape, torture, extortion, and killings are rife. There's an Amnesty report out, and I will put all the links afterwards into the chat together with the leaflet, which has got also all the links. In between January 21 and June 21, over 15,000 refugees were intercepted by the Libyan Coast Guard. Of those, only 6,000 could be accounted for by June. So we are campaigning intensely against the collaboration of Frontex and Italy with the Libyan Coast Guard. And that is basically where the demonstration, which we are organizing for the 23rd of October on a Saturday, that is one of our main targets. What is also happening is the criminalization of NGOs who are doing search and rescue. So while basically the search and rescue is pretty much so outsourced to the Libyan Coast Guard, those NGOs who are rescuing people and bringing them to Europe are getting criminalized. The Juventa, a little ship by the NGO Jugend Rettet, saved 14,000 lives in the 2 years it was operating until it was impounded by the Italian authorities. And now the 21 crew are in the dock. They are from Save the Children, from Médecins Sans Frontières, and from Jugend Rettet. And throughout Europe, there are violent pushbacks at the borders in Greece and Bulgaria and Croatia. And now, right now, at the moment, you probably have heard it in the news, there are refugees trapped between the Belarus and the Polish border without without food and shelter. And there's a little protest outside the Polish office, the Polish embassy tomorrow at 4 o'clock, where I will be speaking as well. So just quickly coming back to the demonstration we are organizing. We are supporting the demonstration against the Nationality and Borders Bill on the 20th. And in addition, we are organizing a demonstration addressing the wider context on Saturday, the 23rd. We are starting at 12 noon at the Embassy of Italy. Then we are walking to the Embassy of Malta, and then from there to the Home Office. And our headline speaker is Jeremy Corbyn. So I hope that many of you will be joining us on the Saturday as well. Come on the Wednesday, come on the Saturday, and let's together show that we stand up for refugees. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Orika. It's brilliant to have you, and it's good as we get towards the end of our panel to have some actions as well that we can come out of today's conference and get involved in. I'll make more announcements about some of those actions in detail and what people can do where they are at the end of the meeting. Just before I bring in our last panel speaker, I'll just let people know that we will have time for discussion. We won't have an awful lot of time, so if you're quite keen to come in the discussion, it might be worth thinking about sticking your hand up. I can see we've got one hand up in the chat now, but if you're keen to come in and say something, we have said that we'll auto mute people after 3 minutes, just to make sure we get as many in. But if anyone can fit their contribution into 2 minutes, of course that enables more people to come into the discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Pinar, who's our final speaker on the panel. Very busy, prominent, active human rights campaigner, and also was another leading activist inside Pollokshields on that mass action that stopped the Dawn Raid, as well as many other actions and campaigns that Pinar is involved in around those issues. So really glad to have you again, Pinar. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. My name is Pinar from Glasgow. I also work with Maryhill Integration Network and involved with various other campaigns. Thank you, Julia, for inviting me to speak alongside so many wonderful people across the country who are campaigning for rights of people who are seeking asylum and refuge. I just wanted to kind of talk about what the experience we had and the gathering we had at Pollokshields and some of the issues that people experience and how we could be involved in campaigning. What we had seen with the solidarity that took place in Pollokshields was amazing, and it's gathered attention across the country and I would say worldwide as well. And this has been the case because of all the campaigning and solidarity and the unity we had over many years in Glasgow, from trade unions, from organisations, from faith-based groups, from various community groups. For those who doesn't know, what happened this year was in April, we had a member at Maryhill Integration Network who experienced a dawn raid. And from there, there was a lot of public awareness about what is happening in terms of when somebody experiences a dawn raid. A dawn raid is when immigration officers from the Home Office comes to your house early morning to take you to a detention centre and then potentially to deport you. Thankfully, the person was not deported and detained in April. And from there, in May, what happened was in Pollokshields, 2 people had experienced a dawn raid and a raid early morning. And the community managed to come together, and with the support of networks from various organisations, No Evictions Network, from Stand Up to Racism and everyone else, in few hours, hundreds of people came together to protect the people who were being held in the van and to say that these are our neighbours, we don't want them to be deported and detained. It took about 8 hours for the whole of the community to resist the immigration officers. And after 8-9 hours, with the help of the community and everybody involved, the 2 people were eventually released from the van and back to the community, which was a huge victory for everybody. But unfortunately the next day we learned that there was another dawn raid taking place, and unfortunately this time the person was taken to detention centre. And since then, we've not heard a lot of news about people experiencing dawn raids, but we know that the issues that people are facing is horrendous. And just echoing what everybody mentioned about the new Nationality and Borders Bill, which is the anti-refugee bill, is going to unfortunately violate people's rights according to international laws, as Enver had mentioned, and many others as well. And it's not going to solve the problems that the asylum and the immigration system that we have at the moment. And that's one of the things that Prita Patel keeps mentioning, is we need a fair and just, and we need a system which is going to function. But the reality is the system we have at the moment is not functioning, and that's due to the failure of the government's policies that we have over the many years, that has been violating people's rights, that has been violating international law. And unfortunately, in some cases, these when rights are being violated, these are not being challenged, and it has been continuing for years and years. And with this new anti-refugee bill, it's going to be, I would say, and I'm sure everybody would agree as well, that it's going to be the worst case and worst bill that we would ever see in terms of people having their rights not seen and recognised. And I think what we need to know from this is the importance of solidarity, the importance of challenging the new anti-refugee bill, the importance of coming together. And we know that next week is the National Day of Action for across the city. And I do urge, please, everybody to be involved in your local communities, involved in your local organisations, to be part of the solidarity and unity. Because if we are not, then it's going to be the legislations and the laws and the bills will get passed. And I would like to just, before I end, to highlight the importance of supporting the Lift the Ban campaign coalition to provide right to work for people. And I think, as somebody else earlier mentioned as well, one of the key aspects for people not to be part of a society, not to integrate for people's well-being and mental health well-being, which over the years worsens, for people not to contribute to economy, to society, is the aspect of not having the right to work. And this is one of the key things at the moment that many of us are campaigning on. And I do urge, if you're a trade union, if you're a faith-based community group, or if you're a business and an organisation, please do join the Lift the Ban coalition to provide and to give right to work for people. And just to one more to say, solidarity to everyone who's campaigning for human rights for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Pinar. That was absolutely fantastic. And we've both been in a lot of meetings about the action in Pollokshields, but it's always really nice to just be reminded of what that meant that day. I want to give a massive thank you to all of our panelists. That was incredibly informative and I think quite inspiring for us to come out of this session and take some action. This session, particularly because we face such a particular challenge with the bill, we really did want to bring together a lot of the different campaigns and organisations that are going to be key to opposing it. So I'm going to bring back each of our speakers, just for 1 minute each, to add any final comment that they want to put in the meeting. Before I do that, I'm just going to give some quick announcements, hopefully. A big outcome of this conference is going to be the UN Anti-Racism Day, which is an international day of protest that Stand Up to Racism alongside the TUC has been a part of organising around for the past 5 or so years, on Saturday the 19th of March 2022. We don't know exactly what we can do with that yet, but whether it will be a day of action in localities, or whether we'll be able to all hopefully march together, depending on COVID conditions. But that is a big date for the diaries, where whatever the format, Stand Up to Racism is going to be organising as part of an international day of action. On the Borders Bill, the links are all on the chat. Wednesday the 20th of October is the National Day of Action to oppose the Borders Bill, and we want local groups to post and share the details of their local events as they're able to call them. We want to see as much happening in local areas as we possibly can on that day. Also on that day, there'll be a demonstration at Parliament, the details of which have been posted in the chat. And on the 23rd, there's the demonstration that Orika mentioned to us to defend the right to asylum, protest called by Amnesty UK and backed by a whole number of different organisations including Stand Up to Racism. So you can find all those in the chat. There's a variety of other upcoming events that will be announced at the plenaries that I'm not going to go through all of now, but keep an eye on what's been shared in the chats and different sessions, because we have a lot coming up in terms of a programme of action for anti-racism in the coming months. I do want to highlight the Care for Cali Winter Appeal, also posted in the chat, which comes at a very crucial time, as we've just discussed. And also I would like to highlight that Stand Up to Racism will be organising, as part of the COP Summit, the official summit, or the People's Summit, I think it's called, will be organising a national online event that will be part of the official COP26 People's Summit. So people should keep an eye out on our social media for that. And there will also be, we'll be part of organising the anti-racist block on the COP26 demonstrations. So do get involved in that. Finally, just to say that, we've had well over 1,600 people registering. People are still registering. Please keep sharing the link for the rest of the conference over the next day and a half. And tonight, please do come and join us for the international plenary, which will have speakers from all over the world, starting at 5 o'clock. That you can join this on our YouTube or Facebook page, or you can register, on your registration email. You should have the link for the Zoom webinar. So please do join us tonight. We've got Diane Abbott, Gary Young, a whole host of other speakers from many different countries. So without further ado, I will just hand back over to our panelists in the same order, if anyone can remember what that was, as they started, just to kind of come back with some closing remarks. And I think that starts with Enver. Thanks.
Julie, thanks very much, and thanks to all the speakers. Really rich contributions, and to those from the floor, so to speak, the virtual floor. I think I'd just like to say two things, really. Firstly, I think we are at a pivotal moment. I mean, this has been touched on, and we need to recognise how pivotal this is. We have a government that is going in clearly one very discriminatory, dangerous, cruel, harsh, punitive, I could continue direction, and it's going to really be a watermark moment, particularly the way that it drives a coach and horses, as I said earlier, through international conventions. So we have to do all that we can to fight it and to make the opposing argument. And in doing that, I think it's really important to recognise where those who might not agree with us are at, and engage with them based on their anxieties and fears, because my concern is that if we don't do that, then we won't be able to win the argument with them. And secondly, that the point that's been touched on about the right to work, I think is a really interesting one, because I think there's a real opportunity there. The cabinet, as I understand it, is split. I think there's an opportunity to really push that argument and win the argument, and ensure that every single person who comes there seeking refugee protection has the right to work, which actually is a no-brainer. And I'm afraid to say my final point is it was a Labour government that introduced that.
Thanks so much, Enver. Thanks, that's brilliant. I'll move on now to, I think Claire was our next speaker. Yeah, thanks, Claire.
Thank you. The Nationality and Borders Bill is fundamentally morally wrong. It's based on untruths about refugees, and it's based in a belief that people in the UK will turn their backs on those who are in trouble. Care for Calais is a hands-on charity. I believe that by our grassroots approach, we are actively fighting the political battle from the ground up. Every time we take a positive action to support refugees, every collection of clothes, every English lesson or football game, every sponsored walk, every Facebook or Instagram post, actively denies the narrative that people in this country don't care about refugees. It sends a clear message that people do want to help, and that our government have got it wrong if they think we don't. So please do engage with our winter campaign. Have a look at our website to see how you can get involved. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Claire. That's brilliant. I'll just move on to call in Mohammad. Mohammad with us. Great. Thanks. Oh, I think you're still muted. Yeah, you just need to accept that. No, you're good.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie, once again. I think it's a very, very critical moment, for the campaigners here in Britain, I think the best thing is that we come together and fight this anti-refugee bill, because this is immoral, firstly, is unjust, and it is criminalizing, the very victims of the British and American bombs across the world. If you look at the refugees, that where the refugees come from, these are the countries where they were bombed by Britain and America and NATO and other countries, and created refugees. We need to come together, fight this illegal bill. The bill, I think other speakers also said, the bill, even if you get that refugee status, if you're coming on the back of the lorry or dinghy or the boat, you will not get the full refugee status for 5 years. It will be for 6 months, it will be for 1 year or 2 years. And then, they will review your case, year by year, or every 2 years, or every other year. We have to fight this bill. And I think if we don't fight it, people who are desperate for sanctuary right now, they will even suffer, further. Imagine criminalizing, those who are running from British and American bombs in their countries, where their country is totally destroyed. The entire population is displaced, and coming to the same people who are bombing their countries and seeking sanctuary, and the door is closed on your face, or you're not allowed to come here. The question here is, legal route, because every legal route is shut by the Tories or Priti Patel. There is no legal route. The only way that Pinar said it so well, the only route is that, you come here is, you just put yourself in the hands of agents or what do you call, human traffickers, and then you arrive here. And then arriving here, you're treated, even if you commit a murder here in this country, the most you go is 7 years or 8 years, but committing no crime, where asylum is your fundamental basic human right, and then you are put behind bars, for 4 years or 5 years. This is totally unacceptable,
Mohammed,
and immoral. Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
thank you. I'm forever asking you to sum up, but I could listen to you all day. So our next speaker is Rosa. I'll just ask Rosa to come in. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Those really powerful contributions, and it's great to hear from the audience as well. And really great to hear about all the activities you've been organising. Great to hear about what trade unions are doing. Maxine, that's brilliant to hear what Sheffield unions are doing around the protest and the leaflet. Do please send that over, and we can promote at the national level. And I think, just to pick up on the point that I raised before, that need to do the longer term narrative work with workers in the workplace, as well as the broader public, to shift that narrative, to prevent that divisive rhetoric that everybody has talked about. And that's the politics driving this. It's not driven by any logic around the economy or around practicalities. This is all about a political gain to demonize and scapegoat the other, so that the government can continue to get away with its policies and continue to allow bad employers to keep exploiting workers. So the TUC has been campaigning on that front for many years. We've produced training material for reps in the workplace around migrant rights and building solidarity, and around organising undocumented workers, that if people are interested, we can share with people. I think that's really important to keep our eye on that longer term work, because looking at the parliamentary arithmetic, obviously we will campaign to oppose this bill and get it amended as much as possible, but it's going to be very difficult to stop it. But even if this passes, if we can in the longer term change the narrative, then we can oppose future racist, anti-migrant, anti-asylum seeker legislation like this. It's good that we have Labour opposing the bill now, but unfortunately, as Enver points out, they have been given to very anti-asylum seeker, anti-migrant policies in the past. We need to keep them opposing this bill, but also pushing for more rights for undocumented workers, and more rights for asylum seekers. And they'll only do that if they think there is popular support amongst workers. So we'll keep promoting and deepening the campaign to get more workers' voices out there, calling for asylum seekers' rights, because that's all workers' rights, and that's important to give all workers decent treatment. So yeah, and just to end by saying solidarity for all of your campaigns, and thanks very much for the invitation to speak.
Thank you so much, Rosa. Sorry about me reaching over there as well. It's just realised my battery was about to go, which would have been a nightmare. Okay, so the next speaker to bring back in is Zita. Thanks.
Thank you. So I think one of the things that was posed was, what do we do about people who buy into what the government are saying and the rhetoric around migrants and trying to scapegoat them. Back in 2013, 2014, I was involved in organising the I Am an Immigrant campaign, which was a poster campaign on billboards and in train stations and bus stations, which showed real people who were immigrants and about their contribution to the UK, the job they did, from bus drivers to builders to scientists to lawyers, whoever it was. And I think actually sharing some kind of stories about that would be helpful. But in reality, I don't see how anybody could not have seen actually the contribution of migrant labour through the pandemic, which kept the country running. Whether that was, from scientists to surgeons to labourers to cleaners to delivery drivers to shop workers to care workers to nurses, most of those people included a large proportion of migrant workers or people from migrant families. And I think we need to remind people of that actually the UK is a migrant country and has been for centuries, not just years or decades. And when we look at the struggles that we're involved in and the campaigns we're involved in, they're all connected. Whether it's workers' rights, whether it's against climate change, whether it's against racism, for migrant rights, all of these things are connected. This bill is racist, and I think that we need to stress the fact that it's racist, and we need to tell it as it is and just speak out about the fact that it's racist, because the majority of the people who are going to be impacted are from the global south, are Black and brown people. And if the government are serious, which we know they're not, but they talk the talk, but they never walk it, about combating racism, actually they also need to deal with the legacies of colonialism and enslavement and empire, which are the key reasons why people are having to flee the countries they're fleeing in the first place. Thank you.
Thanks, Zita, that's brilliant. And just following on from that, we do have a session tomorrow at 2 o'clock on decolonising. So if anybody's interested in engaging in that discussion, do check it out on the timetable. Our next speaker will be Kenan, if you want to come in for some closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I just want to confirm that seeking asylum is one of our human rights. And this anti-refugee bill taking one of our rights. I hope that nobody have to seek an asylum, but there is a fact in this world that there is a conflict, there is a war, there is a suitable countries, like suitable, everything is fine. Suddenly the civil war will start, the conflict will happen, people have to seek asylum. And this anti-refugee bill take one of these rights. If this bill have been approved, and hopefully it's not, none of the asylum seeker in the coming year will have the same right, the asylum seeker now have it. And I want to explain to you all once again that even the current law right now, it's awful. It's not that much generous or welcoming the refugee or the asylum seeker, but at least it's have the minimum. And the new refugee bill, it will remove all that, and it will just convert it to some anti-refugee bills, and everything will be worse. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kenan. And yeah, thanks to all our speakers. We've just got Orika next to come in and sum up. Thanks.
Right. Yes. Well, basically, the government thinks that creating a hostile environment for refugees and migrants is a vote winner, and we have to stand up and tell them otherwise. Please come and make your voice heard on the 20th outside Parliament and around the country. On the 23rd, marching from the Italian embassy, 12 noon, to the Home Office for the rally at 2:30. And afterwards, there's a week of action from Patients Not Passports, protesting against the hostile environment, and continue in your workplaces, your neighborhoods, and please support Care for Calais, who are doing this really vital work on the ground.
Fantastic, thanks, Ulrike. And last but certainly not least, we've got Pinar. She's still with us. Hi,
yeah,
Pinar.
thank you, Julie. Just echoing what everybody said, it's really important, and I think it's really crucial timing. Now it's now is the time that we all come together and unite within all the various organisations and places that we are involved with. And as somebody else mentioned, it's important that everybody does this, not just the campaigners or not the people who are seeking asylum or refuge. It's all of us, and it's all of our responsibility to make sure and to oppose the anti-refugee bill. And I'd like to just end by saying that it is time to lift the ban, and it is time to provide right to work for people. If we want a dignified system, if we want in long term people to contribute to economy, people to be part of society and for well-being, this is one of the biggest campaigns I feel that we should all be supporting. And if you are a member of organisation, faith group or business or a local community, please do sign up to the campaign, and please do take part in the various actions that is going to take place across the country next week. Thank you, and solidarity.
Thanks, Pinar. And again, just a massive thank you to all of the speakers. I think a lot of ground was covered, a lot of clarifying of demands that we can go and fight for inside the movement, and actions and stuff that people are involved in. So I would encourage everybody in the meeting to check out all the different links, to check out the different organisations that were here as part of the panel today, and what initiatives are coming up. Big thank you to everybody. I know it was quite a busy session for speakers, but this is just the beginning of a campaign really against the Borders Bill, and we want to make sure that people go away feeling armed with those arguments. The session will be put out as a video that people can use as a resource for the panel speeches on Facebook and on YouTube. So we'll make sure to circulate that very widely if people want to go back and remind themselves of some of the key points or share it, and so on. Definitely get involved in the different actions that have been mentioned or are in the chat, and please do join us for the international plenary at 5 o'clock. We hope to see you all then. It's been a really good session. Thanks.